Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that feels like it's pulled straight out of a Hollywood true crime thriller. But I promise you, every single detail we're going to talk about is entirely real. Picture this. It's a quiet suburban house in Michigan at night. You've got those flashing red and blue police sirens bouncing off the windows and yellow forensic tape zigzagging across a completely messy living room. A chilling crime has literally just happened. But what makes this case absolutely fascinating is the crazy piece of evidence that blew it wide open. Because get this, the only surviving witness in that room wasn't actually human. So how do you solve a murder when the trail goes completely, utterly cold? I mean, that's the ultimate nightmare for any investigator, right? And it's the exact hurdle authorities ran into here. Just imagine the sheer suspense and, honestly, the massive frustration of a dead-end investigation. You've got a gruesome crime scene, you have victims, but the clues, they just seemingly vanish into thin air. It makes you wonder, how on earth do you find justice when the physical evidence is basically a ghost? Let's set the timeline here. It's May 2015. A shocking crime totally rocks this quiet Michigan neighborhood. 45-year-old Martin Durham is found fatally shot inside his own home. And right next to him is his wife, Glenna, who's discovered severely injured. It was just a chaotic, horrific scene. But literally just days later, the trail goes completely cold. I mean, the investigation hits a massive brick wall. That is, until a few weeks pass and something super bizarre happens. Somebody starts displaying some really disturbing behavior. But, spoiler alert, it wasn't a suspect. To understand why the trail went cold so fast, we really have to look at what investigators initially suspected. Looking at those awful injuries to both Martin and Glenna, the absolute first theory was a tragic home invasion. You know, it really looked like someone had just broken in, committed this terrible act of violence, and vanished into the night. But as detectives dug deeper, the pieces just weren't fitting together. It was like a giant puzzle where half the pieces belonged to a totally different box. They were basically chasing a phantom. Okay, let's dive into this, because the killer made one absolutely critical mistake. In all the chaos of the crime scene, they completely overlooked the one and only living witness left in the room. Just sitting right there in his cage, soaking in every single horrifying second of the whole shebang, was Martin's pet African gray parrot, a bird named Bud. He was literally hiding in plain sight. So in the weeks following the murder, Martin's family takes Bud in. But pretty quickly, they start to notice some deeply disturbing behavior. Bud isn't just acting like your run-of-the-mill pet anymore. He is very clearly suffering from severe trauma. And, well, how does a highly intelligent parrot process trauma? By repeating exactly what it heard. Bud actually begins aggressively mimicking this fierce, highly emotional, shouting argument. He is replaying something terrible. The family obviously listens closely to this mimicking, and honestly, the details are just bone-chilling. The traumatized parrot is frantically switching back and forth between two distinct tones of voice. He drops his pitch down into this deep man's voice, and then rapidly switches to a frantic, super agitated woman's voice. I mean, he is literally acting out a two-sided argument, perfectly capturing the intense emotional tension of that fateful night. So the crucial point is what happens next. Out of absolutely nowhere comes this chilling breakthrough. Right in the middle of this intense two-toned argument, Bud screams at the top of his lungs. He mimics Martin's exact voice, aggressively shouting, "Don't shoot!" And then, immediately following those terrifying final words, Bud makes the distinct, unmistakable sound of a simulated gunshot. What we're looking at here was essentially a living, breathing audio replay. The parrot was perfectly, flawlessly recreating his owner's terrifying final moments. The intonation, the exact phrasing, the horrible sound of the weapon firing, it was all permanently recorded right there in Bud's memory and played back out loud. This bizarre, totally unique piece of evidence blew what was a completely cold case wide open. And this brilliantly illustrates the final resolution of our story. Because of Bud's horrifying audio replay, that whole staged home invasion theory totally shattered. Actually, scratch that. It was completely obliterated. The parrot's mimicry proved that Glenna had actually shot her husband during that frantic argument, before turning the gun on herself just to stage a cover-up. Thanks to this crazy breakthrough, she was taken to trial, found guilty of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison. The witness everyone overlooked delivered the exact testimony that closed the case. It leaves you with a seriously haunting thought, doesn't it? We usually look at our pets as these cute, silent observers, but in reality, they are absorbing every little thing around them. In Martin's case, his pet literally held the key to justice when all human trails had completely vanished. So it really begs the question, if our pets could testify, how many more secrets, hiding right there in plain sight, would finally be revealed? Definitely keep that in mind the next time you think you're alone in the room. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay curious.